The Montgomery legacy. In the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina, a towering figure stood above the rest, not just in stature, but in wealth and influence. Harrison Montgomery was a name whispered in boardrooms, in the lobbies of luxury hotels, and in the circles of the world's wealthiest elite. The Montgomery empire stretched far and wide, from opulent resorts and hotels to high-end fashion brands. He had earned his fortune through grit, determination, and an unrelenting drive to build something everlasting. But as is often the case with men who rise to such heights, Harrison had in Emishidden patient adversaries, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. While Harrison was the face of the empire, there was one thing that anchored him more than any deal or business venture: his son, Ethan. Ethan Montgomery, at the age of 11, was a carefree child who spent his days running through the sprawling lawns of his father's mansion, playing soccer with friends and dreaming of far-off adventures. He had no understanding of the complexities of business, nor the burdens of wealth. To Ethan, his father's fortune was a distant concept, something his father had built, but not something he had to think about, not yet. Harrison, however, knew that one day the empire would be passed down to his son. But the boy was too young to comprehend the weight of the responsibility, and there were still matters that needed to be settled before the future could unfold. It was on one fateful night that Harrison's fears and responsibilities converged. The storm raged outside as Harrison lay in a hospital bed, battling advanced lung cancer. The rhythmic beeping of the machines was a stark reminder of the passing of time, each beep a countdown to the inevitable. His thoughts were muddled, heavy with the realization that his time on Earth was drawing to a close. As his breath grew shallower, his mind turned to his brother Frank. Frank had always been the black sheep of the family, reckless, irresponsible, and lacking the ambition and discipline that had fueled Harrison's rise. Frank had squandered his opportunities. But now, in Harrison's final days, he had no choice but to entrust his empire to the one person he could think of: Frank. Ethan was too young, and Harrison feared that unless his brother took charge, the empire would crumble under its own weight. "I need to make sure Ethan is safe," Harrison murmured, his voice weak as he glanced over at his son, who was playing quietly in the corner of the room, absorbed in a small toy car. Harrison's heart ached for Ethan, for the boy had no idea of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. But Harrison also knew that in his fragile condition, he had to act quickly. When Frank finally arrived at the hospital, he wore a forced smile, attempting to mask his concern with a casual demeanor. "Harrison," Frank said, his voice gruff. "What's going on? You don't look so good." Harrison's response was slow, as if the weight of his words was too much to bear. "I'm not going to make it, Frank. I need to give you the responsibility of my company. The hotels, the fashion brands, of everything." Frank's eyes gleamed not with love, but with a hunger that only greed could fuel. "Of course, brother," Frank replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "He'll take good care of everything." Harrison's heart sank as he listened to Frank's hollow words. He had heard such promises before, but never from a place of genuine affection. "Listen," Harrison began, his voice trembling. "I don't trust you completely. I'm going to give you counterfeit documents for the company and properties. The real legal documents are hidden in my bedroom, buried in a secret spot, one that only Ethan knows about." Frank's face twitched, though he quickly masked his disappointment with a smile. "Of course, brother. He'll take care of Ethan. You can count on me." Harrison nodded, though he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. The uncertainty and dread that clung to him was suffocating. But he had no choice. He looked at Ethan, who was still engrossed in his toy car. "Ethan, come here," Harrison beckoned softly. Ethan walked over, his small hands clutching the toy. "Yes, Dad." Harrison knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "I'm going to tell you something very important. But you have to promise me something. You must never tell anyone, not even Uncle Frank." Ethan nodded, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Dad?" "Teresa. Place in my bedroom where I've buried some important papers. When you're older, you'll know where to find them. But you must keep this a secret. No one must know, not even Uncle Frank." "I promise, Dad," Ethan whispered, his small face serious despite his youth. With that promise, Harrison handed Frank the counterfeit documents, knowing that they were only temporary. "This is just for now," Harrison whispered, his voice weak but determined. "Until Ethan is old enough." The next day, Harrison passed away quietly in his sleep, leaving behind an empire and a family on the verge of collapse. Frank took over the company, stepping into his brother's shoes with all the arrogance and entitlement that he had always displayed. But his reign was anything but benevolent. Ethan, the son of the late billionaire, was thrown into a world of cruelty. Frank, despite his promises, treated Ethan as an afterthought. The once glamorous mansion became a gilded cage, a constant reminder of the father Ethan had lost. Frank's cruelty knew no bounds. One day, after a heated argument, Frank threw Ethan out, his words sharp and bitter. "You're just a child. You condone anything," Frank spat, slamming the door in Ethan's face. Alone and homeless, Ethan found himself cast adrift on the streets. The luxuries he had once known were now nothing more than distant memories. He slept in parks, hustled for food, and learned the harsh realities of life. But amidst the struggle, a fire burned within him of determination to reclaim his birthright and prove that he was not just a boy to be discarded. As the years passed, Ethan transformed. The scrawny, frightened child who had once played with toy cars in his father's mansion became a muscular young man. He spent countless hours learning about business, law, and finance, preparing for the day he would take back what was rightfully his. The hidden documents his father had buried became a beacon of hope, a goal that would drive him to grow stronger and wiser. Ethan's life on the streets was far from easy, but he adapted quickly. He hustled for every dollar, selling newspapers, offering odd jobs to strangers, and using his wit and charm to survive. Every day was a struggle, but Ethan never gave up. He visited the local library each afternoon, immersing himself in books about business and entrepreneurship. The library became his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the harsh realities of the world around him. It was in this library that Ethan overheard a conversation that would change his life forever. A group of college students was discussing a business pitch competition that offered the winner a scholarship to a prestigious business school. Ethan's heart raced at the thought of this opportunity. This was it, his chance to prove himself, to take the first step toward reclaiming his future. He approached the group, his voice steady but filled with excitement. "Excuse me," he said, "what's this competition about?" Mabel, a young woman with an encouraging smile, explained the rules. "It's a pitch competition. You have to present a business idea to a panel of judges. The best idea wins a scholarship." Ethan's mind began racing. He thought of his father's Empirichy hotels, the fashion brands, and how he could honor his father's legacy, while creating something new, something that could make a difference. He spent the next few weeks preparing for the competition, honing his pitch with Mabel's help. She became his mentor, guiding him through the process and ensuring that his proposal was as strong as possible. The day of the competition arrived, and Ethan walked into the grand auditorium with a mix of excitement and nerves. As he stood before the panel of judges, he remembered his father's words, "Be brave, Ethan. You can do anything if you put your mind to it." Ethan began his pitch, speaking with passion and clarity about his vision for a hotel that offered quality accommodations for low-income families. His father's legacy was at the heart of the idea, but his vision was also forward-thinking, grounded in a desire to make a positive impact on his community. The judges were captivated, and when the announcement came, Ethan could hardly believe his ears. "The scholarship goes to Ethan Montgomery." The room erupted in applause, and tears of joy streamed down Ethan's face. It was a small victory, but it was his victory. With the scholarship in hand, Ethan's path forward was clearer than ever. He threw himself into his studies, learning everything he could about business, finance, and the law. He knew that the day would come when he would have to face Frank, to take back what was rightfully his. That day arrived sooner than he expected. The legal battle for control of the Montgomery Empire was long and brutal. Ethan, armed with the knowledge he had gained over the years, filed a lawsuit against Frank, accusing him of fraud and mismanagement. Frank, ever the manipulator, attempted to sabotage Ethan's case, but he underestimated the determination of the young man. Ethan's lawyer, Mabel, worked tirelessly to ensure that every piece of evidence was in place. They uncovered the hidden documents that would prove Frank's guilt and expose the corruption that had run rampant under his reign. The courtroom became a battlefield, with Frank's lies unraveling before the judge and jury. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Ethan sat anxiously at the plaintiff's table, the weight of his father's legacy pressing heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at Mabel, who gave him an encouraging nod, her quiet strength grounding him as they waited for the jury's decision. Finally, the doors to the jury room opened, and the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Ethan Montgomery," he announced. "We have determined that the defendant, Frank Montgomery, has mismanaged and exploited the assets of the Montgomery estate. We recommend that Ethan Montgomery be granted full control of the company and its properties." The relief that flooded Ethan's body was overwhelming. The battle was won. Frank's empire was crumbling, and Ethan was poised to rebuild the Montgomery legacy. The future was his, and with Mabel by his side, he was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As Ethan stood in the courtroom, his mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. He had achieved the impossible. He had reclaimed his father's legacy. But now the real work began. He would restore the empire, rebuild what Frank had destroyed, and take it to greater heights than ever before. It had been a long and difficult journey, but Ethan Montgomery had emerged victorious. No longer the boy cast aside, he was now the man who would define the future of the Montgomery family. And with Mabel by his side, he knew nothing could stand in his way. The Montgomery legacy had only just begun.